welcome back to your hour. Joining me now is Bailey Blair. She's with MHA, Mental Health Association of South Central Kansas. I can't always say that without lisping.
Neither can I.
And this is Suicide Prevention Month, right?
It is, absolutely. September is Suicide Prevention Month, and this morning the County Commission for Sedgwick County declared this Suicide Prevention Week in Sedgwick County.
So, do you have good news about suicide?
I do, and that's such a funny thing to say. I have good news about suicide, but rarely do we have good news to share, and this year we do. We keep very close statistics. The KU School of Medicine, the County Health Department, the County Coroner's Office really supports us in developing this data that shows the number of deaths to suicide and then breaks it down into categories of perhaps social determinants or mental health determinants that may have led to that decision. So over the last 20 years, we've just seen steady increases in the rate of suicide. And this year, we are just thrilled to announce that we did see a decrease in the number of suicides in Sedgwick County. So of course, our ultimate goal is zero suicide. It always will be. When we say that though, I want to give a little bit of grace to people listening, because as a person who talks about suicide for a living, I've lost people that I love to suicide. And the moral of that story, I believe, is that people are going to accept our loving invitation for help as much as they can. And not everyone will be able to hear that or heed that. And so when we talk about zero suicide, I really want people to understand that's our goal. No suicide is worth it. And we recognize that we will not stop all suicide. But to see this reduction in a rate in areas such as Sedgwick County has been tremendous.
Well, that is good news. It's to me, what's devastating about suicide is when you try to imagine the despair that person must feel, that they feel like that's their only way out. I can't imagine that kind of despair.
Right, and I think that's where a lot of us end up, is we can't put ourselves in that place. It's a very difficult place to be, but from everything that we've learned from people who have attempted suicide and lived to tell us about it, that moment is just pure despair. They're not able to think about their family and friends. They're not thinking about the pain they're causing other people.
No.
They can only see this unimaginable pain and only one escape. And so, before we judge the act of suicide, I think it's important to keep that in mind. One of the things we talk about in our training is when the World Trade Center fell, we saw people leaping to their deaths because they were facing pain and horror behind them.
Exactly.
No one judged them. And truly, that is what people who are experiencing suicidal ideation are experiencing. Just this unimaginable pain with no clear alternative.
And the fact that people who are considering suicide, some people will seek help and some will not. But those who do seek help, usually that's a good sign, isn't it?
Absolutely. And studies have shown for years now that people who survive the ideation or even survive a suicide attempt rarely go on to die by suicide.
Really?
Yes, we see that same single focus that was on despair turn to creating a life of meaning. And many see that as a fresh start. But it's really important that we be looking for the signs and symptoms in those folks who might not reach out to us. So that other portion of folks you were talking about, looking for changes in behavior. Are they withdrawing? Are they using more and more substances? Things like that can really be indicative just that somebody is struggling. And I think if we begin to tune into that struggle, I notice something's going wrong. Perhaps we can intervene before it gets to suicide.
Well, and I think a lot of times people are a little bit afraid to intervene because they're afraid that they'll do something wrong, or they're afraid that they might inadvertently trigger.
Absolutely. We can do more harm than good.
Yeah.
And we should leave it to the professionals. And I've got to tell you, I get it. And it's not the case. There's a huge myth that only helping professionals can help somebody who is experiencing a crisis. It's just not true. What most people need in that moment is just to be heard, to get whatever it is that is sitting on their heart and their soul out into the open. Because when you do that, things make a little more sense.
You know, I think when I think about that, you know, it's like when my kids used to complain about things that would happen at their dad's house when they go to their dad's house, and I'd say, I can't fight that battle for you. That's up to you. And but they felt comfortable enough to tell me about it. And I kind of felt like that was a little bit of a compliment, that they were comfortable enough at home that they could tell me how they felt. And I didn't try to tell them that they shouldn't feel that way. That's the thing with suicide. You cannot tell a person that they shouldn't feel that way.
Oh, no, that just adds shame and blame.
Yeah.
I think the more that we can talk about the fact that suicide is not an uncommon human emotion. Thoughts of death, thoughts of not being able to escape your current situation, not entirely uncommon, but for most of us they pass.
Right.
But if we're able to speak about those things and give them air and say, you know, sometimes we get in tough positions that we can't get out of on our own. And going to your story about your kids, I want to talk about the difference between comfort and solutions. Because what you were doing, you were giving comfort and space. And when we talk to a person who's experiencing thoughts of suicide, that's what they need. They don't need solutions.
Right.
We don't need to fix anything. We don't need to move mountains. We need to sit with them, let them know that they're seen and heard, and then go with them to get the help they need.
It's sad in so many different ways. Number one, it's sad because of the despair that they must be feeling. I can't imagine that kind of despair. But the other thing is the grief that it leaves in so many. I mean, it's like a ripple effect. There's so many other people that are affected by it.
Yes, we're thinking now 135 people are exposed to every suicide in those ripples. At least.
Yeah.
And so we've really got to attend to people who have lost someone to ensure they're supported too.
Yeah, absolutely. Bailey, it's always a pleasure having you here.
Thanks for having
Even
me.
if we're talking that.
That's right.
But thanks for joining
Yeah,
us
my
today.
pleasure.
And we'll be right back with Dr. Charles, so stay with us.